All right. I think we're on. How you doing, guys? I believe we're going. So come on in. Greetings, salutations. Welcome back to Black Bear News, where everything is connected. It sounds sounds like a hokey, like History Channel greeting. What do you think? Ancient astronaut researchers say everything's connected. Is live, sir. This is not Memorex. Hello, Michael, William, Prudhomme, Had, Russ, D, Richard. Sorry, guys. Sorry for the delay. That was really crazy. I don't know what was going on. Just kept hitting the start stream button, and then that button would just freeze, and then the entire app froze, thus prohibiting me from actually starting the stream. So I don't know what I did. It was just started working. So greetings, guys. Thank you for being here. Thank you for tuning in. So I wanted to ask a quick question of the chatters. Noel Wilson says, watch those CO2 readings at Hawaii. Well, we will. I want to ask a quick question. Do you think there is a plot by the fossil fuel industry? I can't even speak right now. The fossil fuel industry and, let's say, the powers that be to downplay the threat of climate change. Do you think there is a concerted effort to downplay the threat of climate change to the public? I just want a quick answer, if you guys can give me an answer to that. Matt Angiano, yes, everything is, it sounds a little hokey, but it's actually totally true. Everything is connected. There's a connection between all things, the planet, people, all living beings, planets, the planet and planets, the universe. Okay, so we've got a yes from Kuro, an absolutely from Noel. Oh yeah, CB Unglesby. Matt Angiano, absolutely. Right. Okay. So yeah, pretty much everybody is in agreement that there is a concerted effort by the fossil fuel industry and the powers that be to downplay the threat of climate change. Guess what? You all are conspiracy theorists. Ha 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 ha. No representation, no need for an effort when the public doesn't really care. Yes, every one of you is a conspiracy theorist. I'm just doing this as a mental exercise because I agree with you. Crap. And guess what? Just like clockwork, the gardeners have showed up to destroy this live stream. Guys, I don't know how much longer I can actually do this because I'm going to have to close this door, and then I don't think there's going to be much of a stream. Oh, Richard Monroe, distorting science is the MO. Oh, so people are distorting science? Yeah. So to go back to no representation said no need for an effort when the public doesn't really care. No, they don't really care, but there is an actual effort. There is an effort. If you say that there isn't an effort, I would say, yeah, he totally is. The gardener, coincidence? Hold on one second. Yeah. we'll see. We'll see how this goes, guys. I don't know how well it's going to go. We'll try. We'll try. So to get back to the point I was trying to make is that all of you agree that this is the case, that there is a concerted effort on the part of, certain powers that be to downplay or minimize or basically misinform the public about the threat of climate change, which actually makes all of you conspiracy theorists. Why does it make you conspiracy theorists? Because, a concerted effort by multiple organizations or entities or factors working together to, mislead or dupe or, run a story or whatever, that is called a conspiracy, right? And so that's a conspiracy theory backed by fact. Right? Because there are many facts, that prove that this is what's going on, right? This has been proven over and over again. Again, if you believe Bernie Sanders, or if you believe the idea that the oligarchy or the 1% control our government or control what policies are passed, people might call you a conspiracy theorist. But the thing is that conspiracy is proven out by fact. And in fact, there was a Stanford research paper which said that, 80% of the policies which are put forward by the global elite, or not the global elite, but let's say those in power, those with money and power and influence, 80% of those policies are pushed through or put through as actual policy changes. And probably 20% or less than 20% of what the people want are actually pushed through as changes. And some people think it's a lot less than that. Right. Red says the tobacco lobby proved the point in the 60s and 70s. Matt Angiano, we're forming a conspiracy on this live stream, technically. Sure. So the thing is that, right. It's funny when people call somebody a conspiracy theorist as a way to, make them look like a bad person or a crazy person or not to be listened to or, whatever. It's not a very bright thing to say. It's not a very insightful thing to say. It's not it's not a good point of argument to come from. So, let me just, because I'm saying this because we've had conversations in the past and we've had conversations in the recent past about, what is, who's a conspiracy theorist or what's a conspiracy theorist. Somebody called me a conspiracy theorist the other day, as if that's the basis for factual reasoning or, you believe in this conspiracy, so therefore you're wrong about everything. You're not to be listened to on any point because I called you a conspiracy theorist. It's a rather ridiculous premise, that somebody's a conspiracy theorist, so they're crazy, they're not to be listened to, they're whatever. My actual belief is that, I believe that many conspiracies are true because they're backed by fact. And, there are conspiracies that I absolutely don't believe in or don't put a lot of weight on because there's not a lot of fact behind them, or there's just not something that I personally can see as factual behind them. So I'm not one of those people that believes that every single conspiracy theory is true. And that's kind of why you would call somebody a conspiracy theorist, right? When you call somebody a conspiracy theorist, you're painting them as one of those people that believes that all conspiracies are true. Oh my God, they're always plotting against us. All of these things are going on. You know, it's all a simulation. It's all a game. We live in a matrix. Yeah, so it's interesting, no representation, that you're saying. You're agreeing with me. If 0% of the public wants something passed, it has the same odds of passing as if 100% of the public wants. Right, like the public wants Medicare for all. The public wants substantial action on climate change. The public wants, you know, debt forgiveness. You know, the public wants homes for the homeless. You know, the public wants, you know, real goods and services for the average American. The public wants a living wage, right? The public wants all these things, but oh my God, we just can't. It's such a tough, you know, such a complicated issue. I mean, I just don't know how we could pass it. Who's going to pay for it? How could we possibly do all this? You know what I mean? They've created this thing in people's minds where it's, oh my God, what a mountain this is, what a hurdle this is to give people all these things. So, you know, we were talking about vaccines yesterday, and, you know, people were like, oh my God, how could you, you know, it's ridiculous how you could think these things are, you know, all vaccines are good, and, you know, they're good and they're cheap and they're only for the good of humanity. You know, my actual position on it is not that I think that all vaccines are bad, or, oh my God, you know, steer clear of all vaccines at all times. My position on it is that having a healthy skepticism about vaccines in the vaccine industry is probably, it's understandable, right? Just like it's understandable when I'm not a conspiracy theorist that believes in every single conspiracy theory, but I understand people who think that way, and I understand why they think that way, because if you've been lied to long enough, if you realized the enormity of some of the lies that have been foisted on the public, you know, why wouldn't you start thinking that everything's a conspiracy? Like, I totally understand these people, you know, right? Noel Wilson, careful, Kevin, you could be a closet socialist, or I could just be a proud, out in the open socialist. Oh my God, how horrible! You said you like socialism. He's not to be listened to. He's a socialist and a conspiracy theorist. So, I mean, just, you know, I don't know. I just really wanted to have a little bit of a Red says profit motive seems to be a reason enough to question. Exactly. You know, and in my video yesterday when I was kind of talking on Bill Gates and, you know, just the coincidence of Agenda 20 or whatever, Agenda 201 of Event 201 and this kind of ramping up of the whole pandemic situation. Like, right now it is just a coincidence, but I just like to point them out. I'm not really stating conclusively that anybody is a part of anything. Kuro, you have death to the state tatted on your face? That's funny. Matt Angiano, wait, you're a socialist. You actually care about people? Wow. Exactly. Oh, you know, the new one that they've been hopping all over. The new one that they've been hopping all over Bernie Sanders' press secretary on Twitter lately is that she's toxic because, you know, she brought up the idea that poor people with cancer or diabetes shouldn't die because they're poor. Oh, that's toxic. if you're a socialist and you care about people, you might be dangerous or toxic, or you may, you're this far away from being one of those people that might have fit in Nazi Germany, right? Because caring about people is the same as wanting to kill people, or put people under, people under, grave social, I don't know what you want to call it, authoritarianism. Russ Taylor, 7/7 in London happened as they were running a mock-up of an identical event. Boom. Exactly. That's what I was trying to say. There is always some kind of simulation going when the real thing happens. Do you ever notice that? So, whatever. I wanted to start this video off on a Richard Monroe. I actually totally agree with you. I totally agree with you, but these are not. I didn't hire. I'm not in charge of anything that's going on. So there you go. No representation. Conspiracies are about facts. If the conspiracy uses the correct facts or not is dependent on the conspiracy. Huh? Yeah, well, that's the thing. If there's I'd say if there's a certain amount of facts behind the conspiracy, you could put it in the category of conspiracy fact. I think that there are some conspiracies with very little, factual information behind them. Deb Van Poelen, totally opposed to mandatory vaccines. Yep, so am I. Proudhon brings up a very good point. The difficult thing for doomers is accepting that if the banking or oil industries cease to function tomorrow, there would be mass death. We've built an over-complex society. Indeed, and that's, so, and that's the thing that I like to bring up every once in a while is, the idea of humanitarianism, right? Like, we were talking about Bill Gates yesterday, he's doing all this humanitarian impulse that he has with all of this work with vaccines or, whatever. He's actually even interested in climate change. We're going to get into that in a little bit. All of this is this, this great humanitarian instinct, this push of humanitarianism to help the people. It's just so lovely, keeping, and really the idea behind all of this is keeping people alive, keeping people healthy. And, as human beings, we see all of that as like, oh, that's really great. That's what we want to do. But in the seen from the lens of climate change, that humanitarianism actually is destructive to the biosphere, right? Keeping people alive at whatever cost, spending whatever amounts of money on whatever, medical help or food or drugs or, it's, I'm a socialist. I want people to have good things. I want people to have nice things. I want people to be taken care of. At the same time, at what cost to the biosphere does all that humanitarianism come? Let's see. Sorry, there's just kind of a lot of noise going on, so it's difficult for me to keep a train of thought. Um, hold on. I just want to go back to this. Oh, somebody asked, do you consider the McPherson paradox a conspiracy theory? No, not at all. I mean, there's no conspiracy. Um, if anything, the conspiracy is that, I mean, there's very little. The overarching conspiracy to keep people underinformed about climate change has created this situation where people are barely cognizant of the science around climate change, right? Um, and so, because people are barely cognizant about the science around climate change, most people don't even understand what the hell global dimming is or aerosol masking effect. You know, if you say the aerosol masking effect, you know, even to 90% of the people that understand climate change, they probably would be like, "What? What's that? I don't know." If I went onto Facebook right now and started talking about global dimming or the aerosol masking effect, I would imagine that maybe, you know, 5 people might understand what I'm talking about, and they'd all be people from this channel that follow me on Facebook. So none of the other people, the 5,000 people that follow me or I'm friends with, nobody would know what the hell I'm talking about. So, but the actual paradox, no, it's not a conspiracy. It's just it's a scientific idea. You know, it's a theory that has some has some facts behind it. That has been actually borne out in many studies, right? There's been studies around it. You know, they've come to the conclusion that this thing is actually happening. Natural Progressive says exactly my dilemma, Kevin. Humanitarian or whole planet advocate. They contradict each other. They kind of do, because if you really start taking in the health and well-being of the biosphere, if you really start putting that forward as more important than anything else, you have to actually get to a place where humans have to really take the importance down, by many notches. And we are so brainwashed from birth. We are programmed from birth to believe in our superiority. I mean, in so many ways that we are not even aware of, right? There's a privilege to being human that most humans, like if you really start getting deep into this discussion with people, I mean, they'd be like, "Screw you, Jack. I'm not having this conversation, right? We're just superior, or God made us this way, or whatever. We're supposed to come first. We're supposed to, always keep people alive. We're supposed to always make room for more people." The health and well-being of people is always supposed to come first. Scott Andrews says record number of CEOs retired last year. It's almost like they saw the writing on the wall. I mean, it is very interesting, and it is, again, a coincidence. Although I think a lot of people were seeing, multiple threats. There's, we're living in an age where, whether somebody knew that the pandemic was coming or not, I think people were seeing that there was an economic, explosion waiting to happen. I think many people, especially if you are in the military or if you are in elite circles, many people understand that climate change is coming quickly to a theater near you. All right, guys, give me a second. we were doing okay there, but it was getting a little skippy. Owl Nation Legal says this coalition has, I think you mean has, not had, more power than AOC and Sanders combined if you folks moved as a unit, but can you? I agree with you. Owl Nation Legal, can we? I agree with you. Is there an us? I agree with you. I think it has to happen. I think more and more people are understanding that Bernie Sanders is not going to save us. AOC is not going to save us. Anybody who's in the government right now is not going to save us. Even the so-called progressives are more interested in consolidating and keeping their power, and their powers end up hardly ever being for the good of the people. Maybe on very small levels, but it mostly seems to be talk, and platitudes, and with very little action behind it. So I think that a true movement, or a true opposition to the powers that be, is going to have to come from outside, and it's going to have to come from people mobilizing. Matt Angiano, human supremacy, like when every time I talk about veganism being animal abuse. Veganism being animal abuse? Christian Sorensen, around 80 Fahrenheit in Denmark next week. Hello, global dimming. Yeah, I'm hearing reports of very high temperatures all over the place. Okay, guys. Well, let me, I just wanted to start out with a little discussion, but just to let you know, if you're on this channel calling somebody a conspiracy theorist or saying stop with the conspiracy theories, you are a conspiracy theorist. Don't get it twisted. You're not in the world of, you're not a normie. You're not a believer in the official narrative, truly. So I find it a little bit funny when people on this channel start calling people conspiracy theorists. I'm like, wait a minute, hold on. You are just that thing. Okay, Natural Progressive says elites would never let a crisis go to waste. I would not discount a crisis being created in order to consolidate their power. And, it's all too perfect. All of this is so perfect. So perfectly, timed, put together, whatever you want to say. If it's all coincidence, it's all such a perfect coincidence, right? Just like another thing that happened about 20 years ago, 19 years ago now. I wonder what that was. Okay, so let's get into the story. This is from The Guardian, and this is from today. Will the CV pandemic kill the oil industry and help save the climate? And we've been talking about the oil industry going down, 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 which is, is good news for the climate. It's actually very good news for the climate. Also good news in the short term for people that need to use oil or gasoline products because they're very cheap right now. But all of this downturn in industrial activity is great for the climate. doing more for climate change than any protest has done before. So analysts say that the CV and a savage price war means the oil and gas sector will never be the same again. The plunging demand for oil wrought by the CV pandemic combined with a savage price war has left the fossil fuel industry broken and in survival mode, according to analysts. It faces the gravest challenge in its 100-year history, they say, one that will permanently alter the industry, with some calling the scene a hellscape. The least lurid description is unprecedented. A key question is whether this will permanently alter the course of the climate crisis. Many experts think it might well do so, pulling forward the date at which demand for oil and gas peaks, never to recover, and allowing the atmosphere to gradually heal. The boldest say peak fossil fuel demand may have been dragged into the here and now, and the 2019 will go down in history as the peak year for carbon emissions. But some take on an opposing view. The fossil fuel industry will bounce back as it always has, and bargain basement oil prices will slow the much-needed transition to green energy. There's a little chart here with oil prices all the way down to $20 a barrel. It's actually under 20 for some markets. Who is right depends on a heady mix of geopolitics, profit, investor sentiment, government bailouts, and net zero emission targets, campaigner pressures, and not least, consumer behavior is virtual working, for instance, the new normal. What is beyond doubt is the carnage in the sector. The lowest oil prices for almost 2 decades, with worse potentially on the way. Some major stock market valuations halved since January. At least 2/3 of annual investment, $130 billion dumped, and tens of thousands of job losses. In a few markets, prices have gone negative. Sellers will pay you to take the oil as global storage capacity fills. The price war and CV-19 have really thrown the oil and gas sector into turmoil, and now we have companies really in survival mode, said Valentina Kretschmer, Director of Corporate Research at analysts Wood Mackenzie. Oil wells responsible for almost 1 million barrels a day may have already been shut down because the price of oil is now lower than the cost of shipping it, according to U.S. banking giant Goldman Sachs, with the number of wells growing by the hour. This is likely to permanently alter the energy industry and its geopolitics and shift the debate around climate change, said Jeffrey Curry, head of commodities at the bank. Demand for oil has plummeted as the coronavirus locks down people in their homes and airplanes on runways. The virus will spring forward peak demand for fossil fuels, said Kingsmill Bond at Analysts Carbon Tracker. Is this person's name Kingsmill Bond? Okay. This latest cyclical, I'm sorry. You're doing too much. The latest cyclical oil shock is hitting an industry already heading towards a structural peak created by nations committing to net zero future emissions, he said. As for the impact of the virus on the timing of peak demand, it depends, of course, on the severity, he said. In 2018, Carbon Tracker estimated peak demand would come in 2023. But Bond said it was possible that the crisis has advanced this by 3 years. That means that peak emissions was almost certainly 2019 and perhaps peak fossil fuels as well, he said. It will be touch and go if there can be another mini peak in 2022 before the inexorable decline begins. While the oil companies themselves have long argued peak demand is too far off to put a number on, most observers thought it would happen this decade. Mark Lewis, head of climate change investment research at BNP Paribas, agreed the crisis could bring it closer. When the dust settles, the peak demand narrative will be there stronger than ever, he said. This is particularly true if long-haul aviation fails to recover. This has been a very strong source of oil demand growth in recent years, but the longer we are at home, remote working, using video conferencing, the more people will wonder, do we really need to get on a plane? Awesome question in this time of climate change. The oil price plunge has also demolished the lucrative returns on exploration projects in which investors have become accustomed. This threatens what Lewis called the golden dividend era of the last 2 decades, which has made oil stocks mainstays of portfolios. Wood Mackenzie last week analyzed the impact of an oil price of $35 on companies' previous investment plans for 2020. It's a very, very ugly picture, said Kretschmer. At $35 per barrel, 75% of projects don't even cover the cost of capital. We are now at an average of probably $20 a barrel between different crude oil prices. If even that, we might even be below $20 a barrel. Most strikingly, the fat rates of return projected for the oil and gas projects have slumped from about 20% down to 6%, she said. That's very much in line now with what you can get from solar and wind projects. The oil and gas sector is already a very much unloved sector by investors in this kind of oil price environment. It becomes low return, high risk, and high carbon, Kretschmer said. It is not a very attractive proposition. With oil prices predicted by some to collapse even further, Kretschmer is blunt. At $20, the industry will be decimated. Ooh, that's a great word to hear in conjunction with the fossil fuel industry. The oil industry was already under pressure from investors concerned about the climate crisis and increasing regulation from governments to cut emissions. Colin Melvin at Arcadico Partners, a consultancy advising some of the world's biggest investment management and pension funds, said that after the crisis, he expects investment to flow increasingly towards companies perceived to offer wider social benefits. The purpose of this investment of capital and business to create well-being, to create wealth in the true sense, and I think that is going to become more and more relevant to investors. Oh, you guys sound like socialists. Are you capitalists or socialists? What's it going to be, guys? Adam Matthews, Director of Ethics and Engagement at the Church of England Pensions Board, said the implications for the oil and gas sector could be significant. Demand reduction could be the catalyst for rapid change, and I think investors are going to look at long-term systemic challenges very closely and want to see much greater resilience, as well as climate concerns. The wild instability of the oil markets provoked by the crisis may also deter investors, according to analysis from the University of Oxford's Institute for Energy Studies. This is a market that is being tested to its limits. However, not all experts think the oil industry's loss is necessarily a gain for green energy and the climate. If anything, it may hold up the share of oil for longer because it's cheaper. Could be bad news from a climate point of view, said Dieter Helm, professor of energy policy at the University of Oxford. He said securing a green economic recovery from the CV crisis will require deliberate policy measures from governments. This is where the carbon tax, carbon tax, now is the moment. Please shut up about the carbon tax. It's just not, that is not going to help. I get the theory behind it, but it's just not it's not holding up to actual implementation. You actually have to just nationalize and phase these things out, and you have to just go distinctly in another direction. Carbon tax is still, it's a tax, for one, that mainly hurts people with little money to deal with the problem. Historic opportunity governments are deploying stupendous sums to stimulate the coronavirus-racked global economy. $5 trillion from the G20 nations alone. $5 trillion. but how it is dispersed remains uncertain. European Union leaders have promised to make their emergency measures align with their Green Deal program, and Fatih Birol, executive director of the International Energy Agency, has said there is a historic opportunity to pour investment into energy technologies that cut greenhouse gas emissions. The $2 trillion U.S. CV relief package is doling out $60 billion to struggling airlines and offering low-interest loans that are available to fossil fuel companies. This is exactly the wrong thing to do at this very moment. If you are concerned about climate change, the right thing to do would be to let those companies fail, flop around like fish on a hot tarmac, and die. Without requiring any action to stem the climate emergency, the Canadian government has said it will give loans to its oil companies who say they are on life support, of course, because, Canada, so progressive, so liberal. After the 2008 global financial crisis, there were high hopes that the trillions of dollars delivered at that time would green the economy, but fossil fuels and their emissions powered on ever upwards. Bond said the big difference to 2008 is that the cost of renewables is now below that of fossil fuels. There's no point trying to sustain the unsustainable high-cost fossil assets in any event. It would be deeply ironic for neoliberal advocates of Ayn Rand to ask for a government bailout, of course. Adrian Buehler, an economist at the Commonwealth think tank, said governments in countries like the UK, US, and Canada should now consider nationalizing major oil corporations. Adrian Buehler, ding. Fossil fuel companies won't be allowed to fail en masse. No, they won't. Any bailout should be, at bare minimum, come with equivalent public stakes in the companies and strong conditions for environmental and climate protections and a transition away from fossil fuel production. However, given the intent of acquiring, the stakes should be to wind down production as rapidly as feasible while ensuring a just transition for workers and security of energy supply. Right now is a great time to transition a lot of people away from the jobs they're doing into green energy or greening the environment. And we're giving away money right now to a lot of people, not as much as we should be, but if you took all those investments away from the fossil fuel sector or the airline sector, you can put that towards maybe transitioning us to a low emissions economy or a low impact on the environment economy. We could do a lot right now, but guess who didn't help in pushing for things like that? The Bernie Sanders, the AOC, the Elizabeth Warrens, the Ayanna Presleys, the Rashida Tlaibs. They didn't push for it. Our progressive cohorts in government, or the people that supposedly represent us, didn't push very hard. I mean, they probably pushed, they pushed like this. They didn't push very hard. They're like, we oughta. So, I think the people who consider themselves progressive should really consider, A, pushing these people harder, but B, putting forth other, ways and means in which we can make substantive change in our society. But the global industry trade body, the International Association of Oil and Gas Producers, insists its members have a vital role after the pandemic. Oil and gas plays a significant role in the global energy mix and will do so in the future, said a spokesman. It is too early to predict what the midterm impact will be, but the oil and gas industry has a history of successfully responding to difficult situations, and we anticipate that it will adapt as it has before. Furthermore, the industry has been a key engine of prosperity and a driver of innovation for many decades, he said. It has the experience, the skills, the knowledge, and the resources needed to realize a low-emissions energy future. transition that would be more difficult and more expensive without it. Okie dokie. Saudi Arabia is desperate to cash out. Adding fuel to the fire of the pandemic is the price war being waged by Saudi Arabia and Russia, who increased production just as the pandemic slashed demand, sending prices towards the floor. The moves are seen as an attempt to grab market share by killing the higher cost producers behind the U.S. shale boom. This is another interesting coincidence, though, if you really want to start putting the coincidences together. If you want to start stacking them up on the table of coincidences, the fact that this whole thing happened, the entire, there was a huge, drastic global downturn in industrial output and in the use of fossil fuels across the board. And at the very same time, Russia and Saudi Arabia do this oil glut price war thing. Maybe that was strategic. Maybe they thought now is a good time to do this. But I'm, in the back of my mind, I also consider this slightly fishy. What really was the point behind this? Professor Bernard Heikel at Princeton University, U.S., said it also reflects a more fundamental strategic shift led by Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince bin Salman. With a global clean energy transition inevitable, he's desperate to cash out while the kingdom still can. The lasting impact of the price war depends on how long Saudi Arabia and Russia can keep pumping cheap oil. While their production costs are very low, they depend on high revenues to balance their national budgets. Michael Liebrich at Bloomberg New Energy Finance said the fiscal break-even for Saudi Arabia is around $80 per barrel. Wow. Meaning its foreign exchange reserves might sustain rock-bottom oil prices for only 2 or 3 years. Russia, with a $40 a barrel fiscal break-even and much more diversified economy, can survive low oil prices for a decade. Whatever happens to industry will never be the same again. After that double whammy of the pandemic and the price war, the companies that emerge from the crisis will not be the ones that went into it, said Carbon Trackers Bond. We will see write-downs, restructuring, and radical change. Experts, including Curie at Goldman Sachs, say the climate change debate will almost certainly take a different course after the crisis. Will it? Or will it ever take course again? I don't know. But exactly what looks like remains to be seen, what that looks like. The question is how long this is going to last. No one really knows. Okay, the end. That was kind of long, but I feel like it was a necessary read. Let me get into one more article. So again, we were talking about Bill Gates yesterday, and again here he pops up in a climate change search. Bill Gates, how the CV pandemic can help the world solve climate change. So interesting idea from Bill Gates. I'm basically tying together the pandemic and the idea of using this entire situation to help solve climate change, which is what many people think that this is a good time for. If there actually is a solution, obviously, the debate is still on about that, though, or maybe the debate isn't on, I don't know. Though the economic and social shutdowns due to CV-19 in countries across the globe has meant a temporary reprieve from some of the most obvious environmental effects in places from China to Venice, Italy, the world's nearly singular focus on the pandemic has meant less attention is being paid to climate change, which is very true. I hear very little about climate change right now. However, in the long run, efforts to get the CV pandemic under control will facilitate the fight against climate change, according to who? Bill Gates. How? That idea of innovation and science and the world working together, that is totally common. That is totally common between these two problems. And so I don't think there has to be a huge setback for climate, Gates told TED's Chris Anderson during a live stream conversation on March 24th. The cooperation Gates is observing globally in the science community is encouraging, he says. In the science side and the data sharing side, you see this great cooperation going on, Gates told Anderson. Gates, who stepped down from the boards of Microsoft and Berkshire Hathaway, we already talked about this on March 13th, to devote more time to his philanthropic work, announced in February that the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation contribute up to $100 million to the global response to CV-19. If you $100 million compared to his $96 billion worth is a mere pittance, by the way. That's like, $50 to somebody who makes, $60,000 a year or whatever. So, contributing a whole bunch there. Thanks, Bill and Melinda Gates. Thanks, guys, for that whopping contribution. Gates told Anderson he is very much an optimist when it comes to what scientists working together can do, including when it comes to the pandemic. The amount of innovation, the way we can connect up, work together. Yes, I'm super positive about that, Gates told Anderson. I love my work because I see progress on all these diseases all the time. Now we have to turn and focus on this, but the message from me, although it's very sober when we're dealing with this epidemic, I'm very positive that this would draw us together. We will get out of this, and then we will get ready for the next epidemic. All right. It's good times from Bill Gates. However, not everyone is so sure the global community will apply learnings from the CV-19 response to climate change. How about y'all? Are you not so sure? CV-19 may deliver some short-term climate benefits by curbing energy use, or even longer-term benefits if economic stimulus is linked to climate goals, or if people get used to telecommuting and thus use less oil in the future, said Jason Bordoff, former U.S. National Security Council Senior Director and Special Assistant to President Barack Obama, in an op-ed published in Foreign Policy on Friday. Yet any climate benefits from the CV-19 crisis are likely to be fleeting and negligible, he said. Instead, the issues with keeping the pandemic under control indicate that solving climate change will be virtually impossible. The pandemic is a reminder of just how wicked a problem climate change is, because it requires collective action, public understanding, and buy-in, and decarbonizing the energy mix, while supporting economic growth and energy use around the world, said Bordoff, who is now a professor and founding director of the Center on Global Energy Policy at Columbia University School of International and Public Affairs. Okay. Well, possibly. Will we solve this crisis because of our cooperation in this fight against this raging pandemic across the world? Will this mean a global cooperation on climate change? What do you think, guys? In the way that even our most progressive leaders rolled over in Congress with just giving, this huge monetary stimulus to mainly the rich, the powerful, the wealthy, and, giving the people some stimulus, but, very little in comparison. The way that went down doesn't actually, doesn't really bode well for the the concerted, organized attempt to deal with climate change. I just don't see it. I don't know. No representation, says Kevin. Try not to use group terms with people. It's hard, but once you place people in a group, you can easily dismiss them all. It doesn't help any cause. No representation. If you actually pay attention to anything that I say, if you actually watch any 5-minute section of any video that I do, that's the thing that I try to say all the time. I don't understand why you're even making that comment. I always try to say, don't put people in a box or certain ideas in a box, or don't group all people together. You're actually just saying the exact same thing that I say all the time. So I don't really understand. I don't understand the point of your comment. And I don't understand why you're trying to tell me something that I already reiterate at every moment. I mean, I don't get the purpose of that. Anyways, see you later, Poppy Davis. Thanks for being here. Had Vollmer chess game of Billionaires Club. Rich Diana, they'll have to nationalize the oil industry to prevent starvation. They might have to do that. So if if the oil industry goes under, the gas companies go down. Absolutely, we'll see. You will see, governments, nations around the world nationalize their oil industries in order to keep them going, in order to keep people supplied with, the necessary fossil fuels. Even if they have to do that at a loss, they will do it. I mean, we already subsidize the oil industry in this country, right? So, gas would be much more expensive for all consumers in the United States if we did not subsidize those companies, the fossil fuel companies, and therefore, and ergo the cost of that gas that people buy is much cheaper than it would be if they did not do that. So they're already helping, on some levels, there's a percentage of a nationalization of the oil industry in the United States. And I'm pretty sure that's probably true in many other countries. Christian Sorensen says we won't all go extinct just as the ones before us. I don't know. Extinct means extinct, and if the predictions of climate change prove correct, there's not going to be many or anybody around to carry anything forward. So I don't know. No representation. You use the term progressives a lot. Yeah, but I'm not. Progressives are, there's a broad spectrum of people who might consider themselves progressives. And then there's a broad spectrum of people who might consider themselves liberals or people who might consider themselves Democrats. There are Democrats that are extremely right-wing, that are almost Republicans. There are Democrats that are extremely left. And there's also a spectrum of people under the, but whatever. I don't know what your point is. Okay, guys, so I'm going to take off pretty soon. I've reached the end of my time. Sorry about that, Brian. I saw you just jumped in. We've been going for 58 minutes, so I've reached my hour limit. Owl Nation Legal makes a very, very good point. When the nuke plants go, then we'll be functionally extinct. If not, we might actually get there before that even happens, but we'll see. We'll see if it's a race to functionally extinct, what the cause is. Red says there were once victory gardens. Soon there will be survival gardens. All right, guys. Thank you so much for joining me today. Hope you enjoy the rest of your afternoon or evening, wherever you're at. I will be back tomorrow at 11 a.m. Sorry, it started late today just because a whole bunch was going on, and I just had some technical difficulties that just made it impossible for me to start the video. But tomorrow, hopefully 11 a.m. on the dot. So peace be with you.